Hi, everybody. My name is Charity Counts. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Midwest Museums. Thanks for joining us today for the 2023 Promising Leadership Award virtual event. Before we begin our program, I invite our board representative, Carmen Hillenberg, to offer a land acknowledgement.
Hello, my name is Carmen Hillenberg, and as Charity said, I'm a board member with the Association of Midwest Museum, and I'm also the chair of the awards committee. In this era of virtual meetings, when digital spaces may substitute our physical sense of place, it is important to redirect our attention to the land we each occupy in this moment and honor the indigenous people who have called it home. Because I'm located in Evansville, Indiana, I invite you to join me in acknowledging the Quapaw, Shawnee, Osage, and Kickapoo tribe, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. I also just want to make a note that we're both wearing our Proud Museum person shirts today. If anybody else has theirs on out there, thanks for wearing it. All right, I have a few housekeeping notes before we begin the program. First of all, you're absolutely welcome to have your video on or off if you choose. Just make sure to keep your audio muted until we prompt you to unmute at different points in the program, because we will unmute and celebrate Eric at different points in this event. It is an opportunity for all of us to celebrate our recipient together. So the members of Eric's museum community, but also members of his local community and his family and so on. But also a chance to really learn more about our recipient and their work. We encourage you to react to what you're hearing today. You can do this by commenting or asking questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand and ask a question out loud when prompted. So if we see you raise your hand and you want to ask something out loud, we'll call on you and ask you to unmute and do that. When it's time for applause, you can, as we say in the Midwest, hoot and holler or whatever you want to do. You can also just wave and snap your fingers. You can use the Zoom reaction button, that tool if you want, whatever makes the most sense for you. We also have an ASL interpreter with us today. If you need the ASL interpreter, spotlit in a certain way on your screen, you might be able to make an adjustment to that. I tried to set their location to the top of your screen if you're looking at it in gallery view. For those of you who don't know AMM yet, and maybe getting to know us through this event for the first time, I'd like to provide a little bit of background on our organization. We were founded in 1927, which makes us one of the very first museum associations in the United States. We serve an 8-state region, and our community includes traditional museums and historic sites, as well as art and cultural centers, science centers, zoos, and libraries. And the list goes on, really. We host many virtual programs each year, but my favorite is always our awards series. It's a joy for us to be able to celebrate all of our 2023 honorees through events like this, where we bring together their peers from the museum world and their staff, colleagues, family, and friends. Finally, I want to acknowledge everybody who's on with us today, officially part of our program. My co-host is obviously Carmen Hillenberg, and of course, our award recipient, Eric Pry, and then his colleague, Dr. Gerald Butters. With that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Carmen to get the awards program officially started.
Thank you, Charity. The Promising Leadership Award recognizes the commitment and service of individuals in the early stages of their museum careers who have demonstrated leadership powers through the implementations of projects or through service to teams or departments. This year's recipient is Eric Fry, whose museum career began while attending Aurora University. Over the last 8 years, he has held positions at Raupp Memorial Museum, Darien Historical Society, and Midwest Museum of Natural History. Eric currently serves as a curator at the Grand Army of the Republic Military Museum in Aurora, Illinois. Since joining the G.A.R Museum, Eric has raised awareness of the impact of their museums on their community, foster new collaborative partnerships that have resulted in record-breaking attendance at the museum, and successfully complete numerous restoration projects. Through his leadership, the G.A.R Museum has reestablished itself as a vital community resource. We are proud to have this promising young leader in our Midwestern museum community, and we look forward to seeing where his career takes him. Now, before we get started, I invite everyone here with us today to unmute or use your Zoom reactions icon to join me in a round of applause as we welcome Eric to say a few words. So let's get started.
Come on, Mom and Dad.
All right, Eric, I'm going to pass it to you for remarks.
Well, I'm honored to have been selected for this award, and I want to thank first of all Common and the awards committee for choosing me. You can ask my wife when I heard about it, I was ecstatic. I called her right away, and it was truly something I did not think I was ever going to actually be selected for. So I'm honored, and yes, this is the part I tell my normal spiel about how I got involved. And I went to Aurora University, which is where I know Dr. Butters from. He really, before I went there, I was not a very good student. So between Dr. Butters and Dr. Jessica Thurlow, they kind of put me on the right track and kind of lit that flame that I needed. And after I graduated, with a degree in history and a minor in museum studies, I knew I wanted to work in a museum. And everyone, we just went through interviews for education specialists, and everyone always asks, why did you want to work in a museum? It goes, because I love history and I have a passion. And I find that true with all museum people. We're all very passionate people. And so I knew I wanted to work in a museum, and I applied everywhere. And met with rejection email after rejection email. And it got to the point where right before my birthday in July, I was sitting at my parents' house, and I said, you know what, I'll go old school. And I just started calling every museum within 50 miles of my parents' house in Darien. And I ended up speaking to a woman who would become very dear to me, Rena Church, who was the public art director here at the city of Aurora. And at that time, they hadn't quite opened the museum yet. She goes, well, we're not hiring, but maybe next year we'll have something that you could apply for. Send me a resume and we'll go from there. I said, okay. Well, at least she answered the phone. That was the highlight of the day. Somebody answered the phone. And about in March of the following year, I get an email asking if I want to be a contractor on a World War I exhibit. So I jumped at the opportunity. It's something that especially that I was always interested in was World War I, World War II, as most military historians are, along with the Civil War. And after that exhibit opened, the curator before me, Erin Howard, she stepped away. She said that she no longer wanted to. She just had her fifth kid. Kind of understandable. She had her hands full. And then about a month later, Rena retired, and I was left holding the bag. So I had to prove myself. I had to earn my keep, so to say. And through some lucky breaks and a lot of encouragement from the folks at home and my then girlfriend, now wife, she stuck through me thick and thin. So eventually, the city decided that maybe they'll keep me around for a little bit.
All right, are we ready, Eric?
I think so.
Okay. You know what? I think you need to tell us a little bit about the museum first. When was the G.A.R Museum founded? Can you tell us about that, and then we'll talk about the G.A.R itself.
Sure. So the building that I'm actually sitting in was, well, the cornerstone was laid on July 4th of 1877 and opened exactly a year later on July 4th, 1878. And a lot of people think that it's a church. It's that Gothic revival architecture. It's extremely church-like, except we have cannons out front. That was because the building itself, the architecture, was taken from, it's a facsimile of a building in Foxborough, Massachusetts. And one man, Fred Otis White, it was his idea to build this building instead of, in his words, a useless obelisk. He was originally from Massachusetts, and for some reason in 1870, he was over there and he brought back the plans and presented them to the Soldiers Monument Association here in Aurora. Fred was a veteran of the war, and he would later become mayor of Aurora in 1885. Like I said, they raised the funds through a subscription as well as general donations and raised $7,184.54 to build this building. And it opened as Aurora's first free public library and as a monument to the men and women who fought in the Civil War. The space that I'm sitting in here was actually a recently renovated exhibit space and educational classroom, kind of a flex space that we were fortunate enough to have funding from the state, Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and a total of $750,000 to complete this portion, as well as some of the other projects that we've been lucky enough to accomplish.
So Eric, those Civil War veterans eventually died off. What happened to the building after that?
Well, it was always a city building because the Soldiers Monument Association was a commission created by the city. And prior to his death, Daniel Augustus Wedge founded the G.A.R Memorial Association in 1939. He died in 1947, so he was able to see the first 8 years. And they were tasked with preserving the building and maintaining it. Unfortunately, they were a nonprofit group, which means donations were, as many of us know, very difficult to come by, and eventually money started drying up. That is when, in the 60s, in 1963, the city of Aurora, the mayor at that time and city council decided it would be best to create more parking for the downtown area and demolish the old post office, the old city hall, and they're going to demolish this building, like I said, just for more parking. We were fortunate that a World War I veteran stepped in and raised enough funds to save the original 1877 edition or portion, as well as the 1904 edition stair tower that was placed on to connect another portion that was later torn off. And then in 1999, again, you can only fundraise so much with the nonprofit. Well, when they tore off the rear of the building, the 1885 edition, they didn't realize that the whole building would start collapsing into the Fox River. And that's when Rena Church stepped in and really got, there were many others, and I wish I could remember their names, many people that I have not met who deserve the recognition. I wish I could give them that. But Rena, she really did lead the charge in preserving this building and getting the city of Aurora to recognize the cultural importance. So they were able to fundraise about $3.5 million to stabilize the building and restore the upper floor as an exhibit for talks about Aurora and the Civil War, as well as the G.A.R.
So Eric, what was the relationship of the G.A.R to Aurora politics?
I would say that the G.A.R heavily influenced Aurora politics especially, but also on the state level, they influenced a great deal. Of the 634 members of Post 20 that we have been able to identify, at least 6 of them were mayors of Aurora between 1874 and 1906, I want to say. That's when, afterwards, the Spanish American veterans and then later World War I and World War II veterans started becoming more influential. There were countless city council members. I know pretty much everyone says that, but I mean, there are literally countless. Every year, there seemed to be a new member of the G.A.R that was elected into or appointed in an important position, whether on the health board, the education commission, and and similar to that. We also had Henry H. Evans, a member of Post Aurora, number 20, who served 28 years in the Illinois State Senate and was known as the Dean of the Senate, or I like to say the Mike Madigan of his age, where if you wanted a bill passed, you had to get his permission and his approval. He also introduced two very important bills today, which the first one was the creation of the Soldiers and Sailors Home. And then the second one was the Illinois State Militia Act, which later turned into the Illinois National Guard. So I would say the G.A.R Post 20 had a stranglehold on politics, especially in the later part of the century.
Okay, so what are they doing in the GAR Hall for fun?
Well, besides whiskey and smoke cigars, the GAR really did focus on their three core values: fraternity, charity, and loyalty. Fraternity, they always wanted a space to meet. And actually, this was not their first meeting space. There's a Fifth Third Bank right up the road that the first commander of the post, Thomas B. Coulter, it was, I believe, his brother or somebody who was related to him. It was named after them. And it was their wife who was able to, they were a rather wealthy family, able to fund the erection of that building. And so they gave the GAR in 1875 their first meeting space. It wasn't until 1885 that they met here, and their meetings would consist of voting on new members, sharing war stories, and then also informing the common group, or the common council, if you will, of veterans that are in need, and voting on ways to bring in money for their charity causes. They also had loyalty was their third value. So they also, as anyone who knows anything about Memorial Day, they were the ones that really pushed for it and wanted to honor. They had a patriotic instructor that would go to schools and teach about patriotism and loyalty to the United States. And like I said, besides that, they would hang out here and smoke cigars, drink whiskey, and play cards.
So, Eric, under your leadership, you've had a name change for the museum. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So originally, when I first started here, everyone at City Hall or any other department, they always call it the G.A.R Hall. And it's kind of vulgar, name for the G.A.R Hall. Very harsh. And well, the official name was the Grand Army of the Republic Veterans Memorial Hall and Military Museum, which may be a mouthful. So we, the commission and I, who is a member of 9 people appointed by the mayor to help guide the museum in its mission, we came up with an alternative name that might better reflect our mission and inform the public of what the museum actually is. We broke it down to G.A.R Military Museum instead of the G.A.R Memorial Hall and Veterans History Museum, or Military History Museum. And the big thing was, what are we memorializing? The G.A.R, but no one knows what G.A.R is. So we kind of cut that and simply said, we are a Military History Museum. We are keeping the ancestral or the heritage name of the G.A.R and combining it. And I think that shows a more streamlined appearance of the museum, so people can immediately recognize what we collect and what we display.
So, Eric, what is your relationship and the museum's relationship with veterans in the community right now?
I think that veterans, especially the American Legion, I think this was nationally, they are all struggling. There's a real loss of inclusion, I think, because of the different types of conflict that we've had. And I've noticed that especially here in Aurora, that a lot of the American Legions, they're not gaining new members, which means they're not able to maintain the buildings that they've had for the last couple of decades. So what we've really tried to position ourselves to is an inclusive meeting space for all veteran groups and related societies. The first month or the first Saturday of every month between May and October, we also, I don't want to say host, but we are honored to be involved with the Veteran of the Month program that was originally created by Post 1944, who later had to merge due to low membership with Post 84. And every month they honor a deceased veteran from Aurora and tell their story and raise the flag in their honor. We have a very large flagpole out front. And then the next month they take it down and again keep their memory alive by telling that story and then presenting that flag to the family. So we're trying to reposition ourselves as a resource for the veteran community where they can meet, but they can also have these important programs that are recognizing and honoring the sacrifices and accomplishments of veterans.
So, Eric, I know that one of your priorities has also been inclusivity. Can you talk about the exhibit you've got up right now?
Yeah. So this exhibit is actually on loan from the First Division Museum at Cantini Park in Wheaton, Illinois. And it was actually one of my field trip days that another employee and I, we took, gosh, it's probably over a year now. And they just happened to have this up for a very short time in conjunction with another exhibit that they had, an art exhibit they had out. And I thought it would be so important because this really tells the title of the exhibit. I should start with that. Is called The Mexican American Experience. And it tells the story of Mexican Americans and their accomplishments, challenges, and ways that they have really come to overcome a lot of racial bias in a predominantly white organization like the US military, specifically the Army. And there's a lot of stories in here that, even I have a master's in American history and I've never heard about some of these men and women too, because it's not just the Army, but also talks about the home front and the contributions of Mexican American women. So I thought that was very important, especially for our community here at Aurora. We have a very large Hispanic population. And while we can always have an exhibit about, it seems, let me say, there seems to always be an exhibit about the white soldier. Even the sentry up top, you can tell he's modeled after a white male, even though they were not the only people who were fighting the war. So it's important to me to showcase something that we necessarily don't have the artifacts or the stories to tell because of the lapse or our gap in our collection, but something that the First Division Museum was able to effectively capture and share with the community.
Have you had any reactions from members of the community to the current exhibit?
We had an outpouring. We opened on the first day of Mexican Heritage Month, and we had an outpouring of over 90 visitors in a matter of a couple of hours. It was powerful.
So, Eric, how did the collections of the G.A.R drive your exhibitions? Can you give examples of that?
Well, I'm almost ashamed to say this, but we're always discovering something new in the collection. The cataloging process many years ago was not as thorough as I would have preferred. And while that's no, I guess I should preface this with I am the first city employee who has a degree or understanding of how museums operate. So we had to rely a lot on people who are not familiar with these processes. So they would accession an entire box of artifacts and say it contains documents from 1905 to 1935. Well, a lot has changed in that time. So I am going through and I'm breaking them down and separating them to their own records. And as I discover these new, incredibly interesting stories, it shapes, our plan out further. And especially with a lot of big anniversaries coming up, um, 70 in 5 years, it'll be 75th anniversary, I believe, of the Korean conflict, which are stories that we have very few of, but we are slowly getting or uncovering some of the documents that have been kept hidden for many years.
I bring students down there and I love for them to see that one big room that's full of all the curatorial stuff, because that's kind of the hearts of what, museum people do, is trying to figure out how they're going to make a story out of it. Now, I know recently you've been given another collection you have to curate too. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the city of Aurora has many documents dating back to 1853, and I was fortunate to have been asked to assist with going through all of the city council and city clerk documents for over 170 years now, including ordinances. I'm not the only one, fortunately. We have the city clerk's office who are handling the legal documents like the ordinances and resolutions, but we have oaths of office from every year from 1853 to, I think I've cataloged up to about 1890, somewhere about there. A lot of beautiful handwriting, a lot of interesting petitions, a lot of very unfortunate petitions. And one I always like to bring up, well, two of them actually. There's records of the KKK wanting to hold a parade in Aurora. And there's back and forth between the corporate council and I believe it was the mayor. How can we not allow this? And the corporate council kept advising that unfortunately there's nothing you can do, but you can tell them that they cannot march with their hoods for public safety. So I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find anything as far as the newspapers go about whether or not they actually held their march, but they tried not to prevent anyone from exercising their First Amendment right, but to understand that that's not the community of Aurora is. And then on the flip side, there's another petition where this was early 30s, where somebody had requested on one of the East Side neighborhoods to remove all people of color because they are, and this is quoting from it or summarizing from it, that they are too loud, have too many parties, and are bringing too much crime, which we all know are very much dog whistles for a lot of other feelings. So it's interesting because you can see that while Aurora's always been diverse, we've always had kind of these conflicts within our community, which is, I think, symptomatic of the greater nation at large.
So, Ari, let's shift gears here a little bit. What's your relationship with the kids of Aurora?
Well, I wish we had more field trips going, which we're working on. But up until about 2 years ago, we didn't have any programs for children, which is a huge gap, especially for a community like Aurora's. It'd be a shame not to at least provide something. So right before COVID, I sat down with the youth services manager, Simon Rodriguez. I said, there needs to be, needs to be something that I can do to provide for the kids of Aurora. And we brainstormed, we emailed, we called many, many weeks, and we ended up coming up with the July summer camp, which has been a phenomenal experience. And I have to absolutely have to give Simon a shout out, because he is the one that administers it now. He has all the technology to handle the signups and emails and just go through each site and help out when needed. But also, he's the one that saw the gaps in the idea that I brought to him, which was, if we're having a program from 9 to 1, we need to make sure that the children have food. And I have to give Simon a lot of credit because he was able to coordinate with the Northern Illinois Food Bank to provide a free lunch, and this year, a free breakfast to all the 82 students, I believe it was, this year, which is incredible.
Okay, so this is going to happen next summer too?
As long as I'm here, I think we're going to have it every summer.
So what do the kids do?
So it's separated by age. So we have 5th, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd graders, all by their age group. And it's a round robin. So every week, one group will stay with the G.A.R Museum, while another group will be with the Fire Museum, another with APS, which is the STEM Academy. And then finally, we have our public art, our 4th partner, who will provide art and activities for that. Last year, we had the Illinois National Guard unit from Aurora come out and provide demonstrations and essentially put the kids through boot camp, and they loved it. But they also learn about, last year, it was Army, Navy, Air Force, and then finally Museum Day. And they learn about what museums do beyond, here's some cool stuff in a closet. It's how do they go about collecting, and how do they go about understanding the history of an object, which is, as everyone knows, it's probably the most important part when accepting a donation, is where has this object been? What's the story of that? And so they got a deeper understanding of why museums collect, what their purpose is, and also why they are so important to a community.
So Eric, this is a two-part question. What other organizations do you have like formal partnerships with?
Formal partnerships is a strong word, but we have a lot of mutual understanding with most of the cultural organizations in our area. My office is in the David L. Pierce Center, which we share with the Aurora Historical Society and the Aurora Public Arts, which is a division of the city. And then the Aurora Regional Fire Museum is often a partner for many, many city events, as they are based in another city building, but a private organization.
So Eric, other than like formal organizations, what other groups of people in Aurora have you been trying to reach out to?
Our big one, of course, is always going to be veterans. We always want to make sure that they have a home. But heritage societies, such as the Sons of Union Veterans, the Ladies of the G.A.R, and the DAR, the Daughters of the American Revolution, are some of the groups that I've been really trying to foster that relationship with. Because I think it's important that while we may not collect American Revolution artifacts, it's still important for them to have a place that they can meet for free, because it can get very costly to have a monthly meeting when you have to charge $100, $150 every time. And it's important to keep these types of heritage societies active.
So Eric, what are some unexpected surprises that I didn't prepare you for as the director of a small museum?
Oh, where do I start? Anyone who knows me knows I'm rather impatient. I want to get things done right away, and I have to give a lot of credit, especially to my supervisor and the chief community services officer, Chris Ragona and Marty Shanahan, because they have been very patient with me, and I think that's the biggest hurdle. I wasn't expecting how slow some things are to come to fruition. To give an example, we started a project to create a museum store. So we needed a POS system. It took us almost 18 months to get a Square card reader, just because we had to make sure that we were following, of course, all the laws and regulations when it comes to revenue and how that was going to work in the city budget. And there was a lot of things that I was not aware of that city government has to kind of pay attention to, especially when it comes to revenue.
But you know how to dig a World War I trench now, though, don't you?
Well, I have to give my dad credit. He definitely helped. We'll give him 75% of the work. I think that's being generous on my end. He did a lot of the heavy lifting for the World War I trench that we did, and he had the know-how and the skill set. I just had the passion. I wanted to be there.
So what about the good surprises that you've had?
The outpouring support of the community. I always thought, when you tell people that you're funded by government, they say, well, I don't want my taxes going to that. I don't want to donate to this because I already pay because my taxes. And surprisingly, I think part of it is because we are a free resource. I think people are more open because they know that there's going to be a lot of oversight, and there's a lot of oversight, a lot of reporting, and checks and balances, and making sure that everything is done correctly. Whereas some other departments, I don't think they get that leniency from the community because they don't get to see something like this.
Yeah, I want you to boast a little bit. Talk about the way the building was when you first came into this position and the way it is now, because there's been some major changes.
Yes, and I love it when I get to show tours everything that's happened. When I first started, we had one level of exhibits. It was our permanent exhibit, which is still up today, and it does a phenomenal job of talking about the conflict, the men and women from Aurora, the community after the war, and then also the contributions of the G.A.R. But that was it. And once you see it, once you've read every word, there wasn't a whole lot of reason to come back unless you want to revisit that same story. And unfortunately, it takes a lot of money, as many of us know, to renovate a permanent exhibit. That something that already cost $400,000, you'd have to somehow come up with another 400. Well, and this is one of the luckiest breaks I think that I've been fortunate enough to witness. And in 2019, we had a grant that was awarded or re-awarded to us from the Illinois Department of Natural Resources for $750,000. And I was told, not even 6 months before that, don't hold your breath. We will never get the lower level renovated. We will never get the sentry back up top, and we will never get what's called the recording angel back into that permanent exhibit space. Well, with that funding, we were able to accomplish all three of those projects and then some. Something that you could really just think about, especially when you stand in what we call the angel room, our permanent exhibit, is that we have 4 frescoes, one on each main wall, north, south, east, and west. When I started there, they were so damaged from the smoke and the dust and the grime, and then somebody put a layer of varnish, trapped it, and then people continued to smoke in there. You could not even see their faces. They were just so dark. Well, now today, when you go in there, you can see Washington on the north end, Lincoln on the south end, Farragut in the east, and Thomas in the west. And it's really a point of pride. But I think the most important was November 10th of last year. We were able to put the sentry back up top on the building. This is something that's been missing since 2008. They took him down for cleaning and he fell into about 45 pieces or so. We were able to, with the funding, create a replica in bronze, repair the original, and then put the bronze replica up top. And we have Dick Miller, a World War II veteran, who anytime I saw him, he would ask about that sentry. And that next day, on Veterans Day, he was able to see that sentry back up top. And just the look in his eye, knowing that sentry is returned to keep watch over the city, it meant a lot.
You know, Eric, I also should tell the crowd that you're an expert on chandeliers now. Everybody needs a chandelier expert.
If you need to know about gas chandeliers between 1870 and 1885, let me know. I have done a lot of research on those types of chandeliers. Shout out to the Met for answering the numerous calls that I had.
Gerald, thanks so much for guiding this conversation with Eric today. I feel like we haven't fully acknowledged your role, I'm sure, in helping him get to this point in his career. I know
we're enormously proud of him, and I cannot tell you the number of internships he's offered our students. He is awesome. There are literally dozens of students that he has helped them launch their career.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm just gonna jump in and say, you know, as we wrap up here, Eric, that I know you're proud of a lot of things, all the money you've raised and the things you've been able to make happen in the building. But I gotta tell you, these smiles right here, this is like what it's all about, man. And you know, I know our awards committee and Commons already referenced it already. Just we're really impressed with all that you did to make this possible, you know. Not to mention all the other things you've accomplished in such a short amount of time. And that's what this award's all about. So congratulations again. I do want to invite everybody one more time to unmute and applaud and cheer and hoot and holler, whatever you want to do for Eric one more time, and offer some congratulations. We really are proud to have you in our community. And do you want to offer any final comments, having had a chance to learn a little bit more today, even about?
Yeah, I think I will just say that I think, as everyone who are here can attest to, that it was a very easy choice to make. That Eric was very well deserving this award, and it just warms my heart of how many communities and different sectors of people that he has reached just through his, as Charity said, through his short time at the museum. It is quite astonishing and very admirable. So I think many people will be able to learn from you and take the lead from you. Take your lead into creating something great in their own community. So thank you so much, Eric, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
To everyone who joined us today or listening to this recording later, I hope that you found some inspiration here, maybe a little bit of a moment of joy, I guess, in celebrating a colleague or friend or family member. I hope to see lots of folks join us again on the 26th for our Groundbreakers Award virtual event. And I wish everybody a wonderful evening and weekend. For Common and Gerald and Eric, please stay on for a couple minutes. We're going to take a quick little photo of all of you before we close out today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.